This important interruption is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Protect your money and your identity. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code here to get ExpressVPN right now and save up to 73% on annual plans today. Right, let's get back into it.
The top story this morning is the Chancellor has accused her critics of misogyny. And misogyny is what?
A dislike of women because they're women.
Mm-hmm.
It's as simple as that.
OK, well, that's after concerns were raised about tomorrow's budget, which is expected to raise 30 billion quid in tax. And a defiant message before the Commons, Rachel Reeves insisted she would be the Chancellor in 2 years' time.
Well, meanwhile, there's reports that backbenchers are planning to oust the Prime Minister next year, replacing Sir Keir Starmer with the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting.
Let's speak to Deputy Editor at Spiked, that's Fraser Myers, about this. It doesn't fill you full of confidence, does it, for what's about to come?
Not exactly. I mean, if she's already accusing her critics of misogyny, I mean, at the risk of mansplaining to her, really the reason she is unpopular, really the reason there is so much trepidation about this budget is because of her performance so far. She's broken so many of her promises. Last year, she said that would be the last tax-rising budget, that would set the agenda for the Parliament to come, and now she's coming back for more taxes, with a smorgasbord of taxes, although we don't know the exact details on that. It's also just because of her performance more generally. Again, she promised that this government would have a laser-like focus on growth. Growth was 0.1% in the last quarter. The Office for Budget Responsibility, now their predictions are usually wrong, but Rachel Reeves sets a lot of store by them. They have downgraded their forecasts for growth for the next 5 years. So clearly, if people are angry at Rachel Reeves, polling suggests she's the most unpopular Chancellor since the 1970s. There are very good reasons for that, and that has absolutely nothing to do with her sex.
She says she's shocked at the level of misogyny that still exists in public life. Do you think that's right?
I don't think that's right. I mean, if you look at how there have been 3 female prime ministers, I think we're on our 4th or 5th female Home Secretary, 3rd female Foreign Secretary. It is unusual, admittedly, that it's taken this long to have a first female Chancellor. But everyone in Britain is perfectly comfortable with having women in high-ranking places, and we don't judge them as women. And if you just look at some of her predecessors, the way that they were put through the ringer in the past, poor old Kwasi Kwarteng, who lasted, I think, about 38 days. He was, of course, made a mockery of constantly. George Osborne, I think quite deservedly, would be booed in public when he made appearances. So she's not unique in facing scrutiny and in facing harsh criticism, and I don't think being a woman has anything to do with that. And also, she dishes it out just as much. So there was a recent encounter with a local businessman in Scotland, and he was complaining, I think quite justifiably, that the lack of North Sea drilling, or the taxes on North Sea drilling, are bad for the Scottish economy. And she snapped at him and said, "Speak to me with respect. I'm the Chancellor of the Exchequer." And you think, well, if you dish it out, you should be able to take it, I think. She can be just as condescending as she claims that her critics are.
Every time you're online, your money and your identity are at risk. Scams now make up nearly 40% of all crime in the UK. That's thousands of attacks every single day. In Britain, someone has their identity stolen every 2 minutes, leaving victims with wrecked finances and years of stress. The threat is real, and you could be next. ExpressVPN is your shield against criminals. It locks down your devices, hiding your personal information and financial details from hackers, scammers, and anyone else looking to exploit you. So whether you're checking your bank, shopping, or just browsing, ExpressVPN makes you invisible to prying eyes trying to steal your money and your identity. ExpressVPN shields your data with military-grade AES 256 encryption. That's the same standard trusted by the US government to guard classified information. This is the highest level of online security you can get. So don't wait for disaster. Secure up to 14 devices at once and get powerful password protection. Real support is available 24/7 because cybercrime never sleeps. Save up to 73% on annual plans today. Every moment you hesitate is another moment you're exposed. Protect your money and protect your identity. Get ExpressVPN right now.
What are we to make of her addressing the Parliamentary Labour Party yesterday? Because it was personal, wasn't it? And the personal nature of that intervention just, 48 hours out from the budget? I mean, it's indicative, isn't it, of how high the stakes are?
The stakes are absolutely enormous. I mean, we can talk a lot about the stakes for the UK economy and how the bond markets will react, but also the other factor here is the Parliamentary Labour Party. How will they wear this budget? Already her plans for welfare reform have had to be scrapped in order to appease the Labour backbenchers. That has in turn led to her to have to scrabble to find more taxes. And we know, Keir Starmer's position is really not very secure with the challenge coming potentially from Wes Streeting, his widespread unpopularity in the country. And I would expect if Starmer goes, Rachel Reeves would have to go too, because the two come as a pair. They're seen as part of the same project.
And they seem to be equally as unpopular.
I think that's right, and justifiably so, because they're both equally as visionless, equally as directionless. I couldn't tell you what they stand for, what they believe in, what they really got into politics to achieve, other than to simply be in the position that they're in. They'd quite like to be Chancellor or quite like to be Prime Minister. And,
their grip and their influence extends to, for instance, we're going to go to Northern Ireland now, Fraser, so thank you for the moment.
Thanks,
and we're going to talk about how the budget could impact people there, and looking at, it will impact Scotland, it will impact Wales, Northern Ireland in quite a lot of debt. And the thing is, Dougie, that they've got a big data breach payout due to the police, and it's, when's that going to be paid off? They haven't got money to do that. There's no money in the budget to compensate the officers affected by this. So many things where we owe money, and there doesn't seem to be much chance of getting it back because, basically so few people live in Northern Ireland.
Well, that's correct. There's only about 2 million of us here, and we get an £18 billion block grant every year. 70% of our jobs in Northern Ireland are either in the public sector or directly linked to the public sector. And Northern Ireland's politicians here have managed to run up a £400 million black hole, and that doesn't include the 120 million that will look after that data breach that you talked about. But of course, each region of the UK, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland and England, have their own almost devolved governments, and that block grant is dished out amongst them by the Barnett consequentials. But every day taxes will be in the budget. That's national insurance, tax on goods, including wine, alcohol, fuel, etc. That all hits us very, very hard. And last year's budget, with the national insurance tax hike, really hit the high street quite hard. And I managed to speak to Glenn Roberts earlier on in the week, and here's what he had to say.
Well, we need a budget that supports growth, that addresses the cost of doing business crisis that we have in the UK. We've seen that the figures for growth are literally non-existent, and that bows out what we said about last year's national insurance increase. It clobbered the business community. It particularly clobbered our small independent retailers and, I think stunted growth on the high street.
That was Glenn Roberts of Retail NI, and of course he looks after the high street and represents a lot of those people there. But on the other side of that, we have businesses opening and new businesses, and I managed to catch up with Neil Sands. He's an entrepreneur that is very, very successful, one of Ireland's most successful lads at buying up companies and turning them around. Here's what he had to say about education and how important that is in this budget.
Particularly those folks that are, maybe best well versed with the machinery that we have here. The new machinery that's coming out is much more digital, and it does require those digital skills to come along with it.
So what he's talking about there is making two jobs do one. So in other words, those lower skilled workers, educating them, bringing them up, it will help them inside those factories and it will keep them there. But of course, it is keeping them there because the welfare, it's almost insane that we look at some of the welfare that is given out in right across the UK. It doesn't pay you to work. 1 in 3 cars in Northern Ireland are DLA cars. But what we do know in this budget is that there's 16 million set aside to deal with the framework document, and that 16 million will not go directly to companies. It will go to bodies to help people trade with Northern Ireland and understand the processes that they must go through in order to get through the framework document. That deal that was put in place by the Tory government that has caused so many taxes to go on to goods coming inside this part of the UK.